Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So for this week's drawing, I'm going to be doing a little something different. Oh, not really different. I'm going to be doing another Draw This Again. But whereas my last few Draw This Agains have probably been within the last decade, I am going to do this drawing, a Draw This Again of this, which is a very old drawing. See, it was clear back in 2002. And apparently I was afraid to draw humans for a while. I don't remember this, but my sister told me that apparently I did, or was afraid. So I'm going to draw this again. It's going to be a bit more human formed and more interesting, and I'm going to try to keep as many of the elements from this as possible. So please stay tuned to watch. To start this drawing out, I made some notes on the original concept. So my original concept, I barely remember drawing it. It was so long ago. So I decided to kind of write down the colors that I saw in the original and kind of get a feel for what is going on in the picture. This also gave me an idea of how I wanted to go with the costume. After that, I decided to go on and create the figure. So I wanted the figure to be very, very dynamic on this. So I went on to Google and I found some pictures on Google and actually took a couple of reference photos of myself in the position I wanted and used those to create the drawing. So I used them specifically to help me figure out how the anatomy would look. Certain areas, certain muscles will stretch as you're in some of these positions, and it will really kind of give a different look from when they're just standing straight up and down, barely doing anything. So I wanted that dynamic pose to be seen. I also tried to use a light box for this, but it didn't work, so I had to go through and resketch it by hand. For the new drawing, I decided to start with the face as usual. So I worked on her eyes first, mostly because I kind of wanted to be able to provide that depth and texture to her eyes. And it also allows me for another effect. I know I always say, go from light to dark. But on a couple of occasions when you're working with fine details, it's actually kind of a good idea to work from dark to light. So if I made a mistake on her eyes, which I didn't, it would mean that I'd be able to touch it up a little easier. I make a mistake on her costume, which you'll be able to see in a little bit, and in order to fix that, I went through with a colorless blender and blended it out. So I made it so that it would fade out and would be barely visible in the finished product. Also, since some of my markers are beginning to go out, I had to create depth and texture at the end of this project. So I used colored pencils for most of the depth to kind of push her neck further back and make her chin look more realistic and make her look more 3D. Already you can see when I'm shading her torso and her exposed skin that I was having a little bit of difficulty figuring out the angle from the light. Since I knew that there were going to be spotlights on her since she's a figure skater, I knew that there were going to be different shadows in different places. So really think those things through as you're working through this. And sometimes even if it doesn't turn out 100%, just try to make believable shadows and believable light spots. And it will really make the picture come alive. So one of the harder parts of this drawing was actually her hair. If you look in the original, the teddy bear had very blonde hair, and I knew that I wanted her to have very blonde hair too. But remembering the fact that spotlights are very bright and can make shadows really dark, I had to go through and figure out how her hair was going to be done so that it would be believable using the somewhat limited color palette I had. So in order to do this, I took my canary yellow and my Leonette gold and my walnut brown, and I used those to kind of give her a very golden hair color, because they are the colors that I use for gold, which you can see on the strip right down her front. Now it's time for me to move on to my favorite part of this drawing, and that's actually her main outfit, her dress. So by this point, I've decided that the story behind this, to kind of incorporate the original, is that she's an ice skater dancing and in the character of a circus bear. So that kind of explains her teddy bear ear buns and her costume. So the fun thing about this costume was shadows make it so that some of the things are going to be very, very light, and other parts are going to be very dark. So you have to remember where her legs are, under her skirt, and where some of her muscles are. And then, of course, remembering the fact that behind her back and that curve, the clothing is going to wrinkle a little bit because of the angle she's at. So working with all that, I used ice blue, and then for shadows, I used my Prussian blue, and then blended that out as much as possible using my ice blue. Also, for some of the higher points where the spotlight would really be reflecting off of, I didn't completely fill those in with blue, and then I went through with a colorless blender and softened the edges. This helped to provide a kind of muted shine on her outfit. I think this also really helped provide the impression of it being kind of a satiny material that would be really shiny under the spotlights. Going back through and making sure that all the shadows are believably dark shadows. Under her forearm, the forearm that you don't really see very well, so her right arm, there is actually a little bit of black under there to help provide all that depth. And then now for her ice skates and tights. Since I knew I wanted a white teddy bear look, I went through and added her tights to be white. So if you look at ice skating tights, they kind of go over their boots. And so I'm kind of going for that and giving creases and shadows to show the fact that there are boots underneath her stockings. For the background of this, I went for something very simple. I used a gray background, kind of to mute out the what would be the background anyways, and to give the impression of ice that she's dancing around on. For this, I used Eggplant, Cool Gray 3, and Cool Gray 1, blending them all out into a nice, even texture. Finally, for my favorite part, I went through with colored pencils to tighten up all my lines. So this meant that I can make a lot of the darker areas even darker, and help. The nice thing about colored pencils is that they blend a little bit more for this nice gradient effect. It also helps me kind of expand my color palette from what I already have, since I don't have very many Copic markers at the moment. Two things about using colored pencils, and I've mentioned the first one before: work in layers. So you don't want to try to put all your saturation down in one sweep, because you could end up overdoing it. And while you can erase colored pencils, I have always found it very hard to erase colored pencils. So just make sure that you gradually add color, and it will help to really build textures anyways. My second tip is to make sure that your pencils are very sharp. Usually my drawings, the characters themselves are pretty small, so the sharper your pencils are, the more detailed you can get the drawing, because you can actually get in there and really work on those fine details. I finished up this drawing using a white gel pen and white acrylic paint. If you would like to see a complete list of the items that I used, you can look in the description box below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below, especially if you have any ideas for future videos. Share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye!